Yeah.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. We know we have some more coming, but we do have a quorum in place, so let's go ahead and start the meeting. First, we have approval of minutes. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
I'll second it since you weren't here. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstention? All right. January financial package.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's talk off of the summary. So through the 7 months ending January 31st, 2025, we find revenues that are favorable to budgets, or it says unfavorable, but slightly favorable to budget by $620,935 on a budget of $54.34 million. And that's primarily what we see is in favorable federal funds, $1.974 million on a budget of $7.4 million as a result of higher than anticipated use of ARPA funds for qualifying expenses. And it's offset in part by the timing of some of the grant funded projects versus the budgetary assumptions. On the state side, we're unfavorable to budget by $1.8 million on a budget of 21.2, and that is due to the timing of the grant funded project expenses being submitted versus what the budgetary assumption was. So as you'll see, on the operating expenses, we're favorable on the planning because the expenses are not there, therefore the unfavorable federal grant reimbursement revenue as well as the state grant that had ARPA funds that were at a higher pace than what we had anticipated in the budget. Local government funds are favorable to budget by $482,000, and this is primarily being driven by the use of the 5307 Flex PM. That's the local share of that aspect, plus some of the other grant-funded projects, the local share of that. Direct generated revenues unfavorable $54,000 on a budget of $1.6 million, and that's due to unfavorable advertising revenue, which I anticipate will change as we have our next briefing, as significant or a good portion, a material amount of advertising revenue has been booked in the last 30 to 60 days and will come to fruition in the P&L. And this is also in this amount is about $89,000 unfavorable leased employee revenue from RideFinders, and that's just merely of headcount missing, so nothing too concerned about there. And it's offset by about $222,000 worth of favorable interest income and charter revenue, about $38,000. Good news is that hopefully that the interest income, obviously there haven't been Fed rate cuts, and you'll see later our cash balances are increasing, so that will continue to push that up a little bit. So on the revenue side, as last couple, we were oscillating between slightly unfavorable to slightly favorable. So pretty close to budget, no real concerns there. On the operating expense side, primarily what we see here is that the services are favorable about $3.3 million, and that is basically that is being driven by two aspects. The first one is the professional and technical services is $3.1 million favorable, and that's basically the planning, consulting these federal and grant funded projects such as the Downtown Transfer Center study, Downtown Transfer NEPA 30% design, North-South BRT environmental clearance studies, Western BRT, and paratransit analysis and fleet storage. Those are progressing, but in the budget timeline we had anticipated expenses incurring sooner than later, and that impacts the offset on the revenue as well. Contract maintenance in the services is also favorable, about $84,000, and that's basically favorable computer maintenance and favorable BRT station maintenance offset by building maintenance. So the next significant item in there is, we're unfavorable. So insurance premiums are insurance premium expenses unfavorable or risk management expenses. Not a lot of concerns there. We booked the provision for uninsured motorists in the amount of $707,000 in November. So 5 months of amortization hasn't hit. It's about $260,000. So that would take that down to about $240,000 unfavorable. So that net outlook unfavorable is that the provision was about $100,000 more than what we budgeted. That's kind of a function, as you see the reports, the operations, more incidents with the new operators. And also in there, in the insurance aspect was because we have more people, when we had the workers' comp audit, there was a premium adjustment of around $100,000 due to the fact that when we submitted it, the budgeted payroll was lower than we ended up, almost pushing 340 FTEs. So therefore, the workers' comp premium to the audit is higher. So that kind of explains that. The other significant unfavorable variances we've been talking about for months is the purchase transportation for the Care and Care Plus services. That's currently year to date about $757,000, and that's a function of increased demand service. This is also as with the line extensions, so the 1A into Chesterfield, Care and Care Plus is quarter radius or around the fixed line. So we also have the Route 1 extension, the 19, and the 7A and B. So these are all helping to increase the demand for Care and Care Plus. And on our labor, I'll probably go to the summary chart here. So we look at our labor here on this chart here. The total, I'll blow it up a little bit because we're talking about the top of this. Okay. So the total labor is $3,800 unfavorable. So this is, we haven't seen it. So what we're seeing here is it's a combination of the different categories. I'm going to go to the vehicle operations to kind of shine some light on that one. If I can scroll there. So here in the vehicle operations, we see that the total labor variance is $654,000 or $655,000 unfavorable. So when you break that down to get an understanding what's going on in there, budget's $23.8 million. So what we have in there, so we have operator trainees wages of $558,000, which they're not in our FTEs for operators at this point. So we're utilizing ARPA funding for that funding level. So obviously you can see 558,000 of the 654 is due to operator trainee wages. The second item that's in there, in this classification, the way that this report is done, the workers' comp expenses are contained down here at the bottom. You see in the fringe benefits. So you can see the unfavorableness there. That's basically the true up of the workers' comp that's hitting in there as well. In addition, because we're not fully at the budgeted head count through the year for operators, overtime was running, as you'll see on the other report, it's the kind of the narratives. Overtime is about 4.67% year to date for the first 7 months, where the budget is 3%. So that's probably contributing in its own right, probably about $500,000 on unfavorableness. So when you look at this, we have, unfavorable, we have incremental operator trainees, about 558, about $500,000 of overtime, less what the vacancies are, and then you have the true up there for the workers' comp. That's how we get to the 658 unfavorable. The good news is, as we saw before, is that the total variance is kind of offset. Vehicle maintenance, you can see, is slightly favorable at 8,000, and then the facility maintenance is about 48,000. But in the G&A is where we get the pickup on this, and this is, we have favorable variance about $600,000 in labor and G&A, and that's driven by vacant positions. And then the fringe associated with that. So all in all, a lot going on in the labor category. Good news is it's pretty much close to budget. We understand why we're over. We want to train the operators to replace, make sure we can put the service out, replenish because to offset the attrition, using the overtime to cover the scheduled routes when we don't have the full-time operators, and the workers' comp adjustment is what it is. It's a function of hiring versus when the original premium was determined. So that pretty much sums up the expense.
For training, like ever, you did in the total labor?
Yeah, we budget full-time equivalents for operators and we have part-timers. So what ends up happening is that, you know, we make the assumption. So we budget 12 months of the operator's salary so that when we actually probably physically, when you add the full-time people as well as the trainees, you actually probably get over the approved headcount level, but there's not 100% success rate out of the training programs, and then while we're training them, we're also having natural attrition.
And yeah, I think there was a category for like PTO or pay time off, vacation, sick. We don't budget any dollars for that because
We assume that's all
driver, right? So it's double basically. If someone takes a vacation day or is out sick, you're paying them and you're paying the person covering their route, right?
as long as if on overtime, yes. If it's overtime, but if it's someone else that's just getting regular wage salary, they're budgeted already. So
then just pick up a shift.
Yeah.
So we have what we call an extra board of operators
They're filling that in.
to fill that in, so.
It's really the only time you'd go over the budget number on staffing salary is if you were at full complement and still holding classes.
Yeah. And we were using ARPA to make that happen where we may not be able to do as much pre-training until, that's.
September 27th.
We have it till 27.
So that's a funding gap. We're gonna figure that out because we're not.
Well, yeah, because we're not going to want to have vacancies that we haven't already started trying to fill if we have the base to fill it.
Grant money being used for
the trainee program.
I feel that. Do I understand that correctly? That's ARPA grant money that is being used for operating costs. That when ARPA grant money is over, which it is, that operating costs are going to get picked up elsewhere.
Or we're not going to be able to we're not going to be able to start people in the training program until we have a full-time vacancy slot for them to start.
It's just kind of
the other.
Kind of problematic.
It is.
Drive overtime.
Yeah.
But we have increased the FTE to compensate for that in the actual
Plugged into
budget in 26.
Plugged into that.
Yes.
To your point there, if you look on the top, is the sum of 1 and 2, the 1049 positive and the 18. So the net of that is what you're talking about. So
That's the actual.
837,000 is what that net labor variance is, and so part of that is the overtime, and the other part of that is the trainees' wages in there, and then the offset of that would be the few people that are not here, the vacant positions. So that's the whole net of it. So if you look at that number, the 1,887,000 divided into the 13,700, it's around 13%. And that's kind of what we look at, when you factor in all that. It seems that it is right. There doesn't seem to be a big problem there. It's just managing the inflow and outflow and maintaining the number, which, collaborative effort, transportation, HR, and planning, and so forth. So that's the picture of the revenues and the expenses. So balance sheet wise, the takeaways here, the key highlights here is that we have an increase in assets of approximately about $15.3 million. Good news, top line is almost $11 million is on the cash line. And the other portion of it, you have fixed assets increasing about $1.4 million due to the rolling stock that we bought throughout the year and offset by depreciation. And then the other big piece is the other significant item is around $2 million down here on the restricted funds. That's the CBTA revenues that are invested. Accounts receivable is down about $1 million. We currently, there's some large vehicle purchase that came in January. So when we get to February, we're going to see a large increase, probably $2 or $3 million in the receivable balance. But as you can see in the cash flow, the next thing is we're maintaining it. A lot of work has been done working with the grants folks as well as balancing trying to balance all the submissions so that we get more routine process to manage cash flow better. So balance sheet strong, no concerns on that. Speaking of the aforementioned cash flow, I'll try to blow it up a little bit. So at the end of, this is actual through the end of February. We're in the process of closing February right now. But so the cash flow, we have a little over $10 million at the end of February, and I've hidden quite a few, but the position at the end of June was $3.5 million. So as you can see here, well, there was a lot of focus effort in December, January, and February to kind of align the processes for, the procurements of capital assets and grants assets as well, with the timing of submissions and so forth. We're at a point here where we kind of have a noticeable, when we come towards the end of the quarter, the end of March, we have a robust cash position. If you look back, September down below $2 million, just by the normal ebb and flow of the sawtooth pattern. As you can see, at the beginning of each quarter, like in January here, this is when we pull the CBTA resources over, and we pull them over in April. So we kind of start at a peak at the beginning of the quarter and work our way down.
How do you get that 6.1 number? I know we just talked about it a minute ago. Do you have a percentage that you like to use? We're not using 100% of it.
That's the number that's in the regional public transportation plan divided. That's just 1/4 of it. So each quarter. So when these, on our parallel path, we're preparing the regional public transportation plan that will show what are our base operating needs for fiscal year. That will be before it goes to CBTA's finance committee and their board for approval. And that's the number that we lock in, and we just pull it over 1/4.
That's the number from last year.
Yeah.
And 6.1 times 4, so 25 million.
Yeah.
Total gross receipts last year were 30-ish, 31.
So with the cash as it is, so currently, there are treasury sweeps in the back of all cash accounts. So at the end of February, there was about $39 million of treasury sweep investing that earned about 422 basis points in the month of February. And so about $118,000 worth of interest to help the cause. Speaking of the aforementioned CBTA, so this is we have the quarterly reporting requirement with them. So this is through the end of February. You can see that this is the month of December's distribution, which we received in January, which I believe is the September local jurisdictions number. So the second one, the money that we received at the end of February, that is the high point of the annual receipts in the year. So this is probably about 100,000 higher than the previous year's same point. So, I believe the forecast is around 35 million based on the VDOT forecast for the next upcoming year elections. Here you can see we have the treasury sweeps on the back of the Wells Fargo accounts, and then we also have investments in LGIP earning. I'm not so certain if we're going to have all the positive unrealized gains and losses in the month of March when we see there with the market volatility. But you can see the withdrawals were just the quarterly withdrawals. It's the 6.136 million for operations as well as funding our capital programs. The local capital match for CBTA about 242. Zoom out just a little bit. So the total balance currently at the end, it should be February 28th. I missed the 2 there. It's 52.7 million, of which about $51.9 million is available for GRTC operating capital expense for their fourth quarter of fiscal 25 and then 26. The top is about $771,000 that's been set aside for studies for regional public transportation plan and the microtransit studies for each of the year's budgets. And as you can see, the 52.7 million, about almost 50, a little bit more, probably 55% of it's in the Wells Fargo sweeps, and it balances in LGIP. So that's January in a nutshell. I'll take any questions at this time.
Anybody have any questions? All right.
More information.
It is. Good news is you have it all right there. So Next 3 days catching on to all that.
Yeah, and the highlights are, last year we used, and you correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but the highlights for me are we used 6.1 times 4 in our budget from CBTA. So we used, we call it 24.5 million, brought in 31. So we were able to take about 6 million, 6.5
Thank you.
million of CVTA money and put it away. And then the forecast for this year, CVTA money is 34-ish million. So the key piece is to look at the proposed budget for you to see what of 34.5 is in the proposed budget to be brought over 4 times to see if the use, how much more the use is of 6.1. I'm sure it's going up, but what percentage is it going up? 10% would be 6.6, 6.7 million per quarter. And, you know, if we're continuing.
And we've expanded routes, so it might go up more than that.
It's about 7150 a quarter. 7,150,000 a quarter.
7.1.
Yeah.
So it's going up about
About $1 million a quarter, yeah, that's 4 million for the.
to make the current,
What we're showing here is that
not to get ahead of you, but to make the new balanced budget.
So it went up by about 4 and it went up by about 4 and the cost went up by about 4. So it actually kept about the same amount going over to reserve as it did last time, right? Or theoretically, I mean.
Theoretically, it's going up.
Yeah.
And it went from 31 to 34, up 3.5. Close.
So it's close to evening out from where it went up to what we're gonna budget.
Close. We have more capital needs, so some of it got taken off of that.
It's gonna what?
A little bit more capital needs.
You'll see in here, there's a lot of, DRPT asks, for the expansion project. So there's the local share, 2% CBTA, the other 2% goes to the municipalities.
Those capital needs, all that stuff still in the 7.1. Not gonna get into the reserve yet.
No, it's. so the-
7.15 is just the operating piece. There's another $1.2 million in CBTA project support. So total, yeah.
And not even scary, it's like, oh my God, but like, the whole idea is we're trying to keep throwing it away, throwing it away. So we know when we get to 2028, the biggest possible.
You say throw it away, you mean put it
Put it in
in.
a reserve.
Save it.
The idea is to, obviously have the most
Right.
reserve human.
That we can possibly,
Reserve, so we have the most reserve.
so we can go as far as we can. They're fair and still
So,
on expansion where it's warranted.
Since we last met in February on the budget, we've been working, the executive team sat down and we took a second look at things to bring this, because last time we talked, we were a little out of balance, so we were understandable, we're still working through our grants. So this is 30 days more further down the road, and key milestones that, our next step in this process will be the April Finance Committee meeting. At that time, we may or may not know what the final DRPT grants awards are. We will most likely know those by the April board meeting. So the April board meeting, the goal is to have the finalized version of all these slides for all board members, as well as the budget book draft prepared. And then we'll use the May Finance Committee meeting as budget book
Which anybody that wants to come to can come to that meeting.
Yeah. And then go for ultimate adoption for the May meeting. So it's not
Now figured it all out. No. We figured January out. Figured January out.
Which is good, 'cause that was a month and a half ago, I think. You have one of these? Let's just flip through with this. We all have one.
Can do some, can you do
Yeah,
slide by slide?
that would help if someone's watching.
We actually have people watching.
If.
If we have people.
Oh. Ooh, in the haystack.
We don't know.
It's,
This is for all
Stuff, that one, isn't it?
Right, so we get some comments. One, maybe. There we go.
To work. So in this version here, basically, we had, as you recall from the last briefing, we had 346 ground operators. So we basically brought them flat to ask for operators with the 25. We obviously, you can see from the top wage rate, the effective when you take into account that the top rate changes October 1st, it's about a 3.5% top rate increase. So, and then on maintenance, we basically, we had more mechanics in there. I think it's now down to a +2. These were the preliminary estimates, based upon, some of the items, DCU, we may have to adjust the revenue miles and the revenue hours, but that will be, that's in process. You're aware that we talked about medical was 4.65% increase. That's baked into this. The assumption still are zero fare continues. The GRTC operating contribution is 23.1 million. That's based upon 30% of the audited fiscal 24 operating expenses. Anyone remembers this? This is where we had VCU in here at 1.2 million. This VCU contract goes through the end of July 31st of 2025. So there's $100,000 in this budget with VCU at this moment. To answer your question before, the operating contribution piece here for CVTA in here is 28.6 million. Study is about $250,000, and the capital local share match funding of 1.2 million.
So that's the total CVTA share. So if you can go back to that, CVTA this year is about 31 million. And CVTA next year, the VDOT estimate is about
35 million.
35 is conservative. That's a good guess. They're usually pretty close. So the estimate is to use 29, let's just call that 30. Is that close enough? It's about 30 and a little bit of change.
Of it.
And the goal in the budget is to bank the other 4.5 or 5, put it in reserve again. And this year, we're hoping to come out of reserve with CVTA money of about the same, about 4. And I won't say throwing it in reserve, I'll say
saving it, replacing it in reserve.
throwing it away in reserve.
Save it for all that
I knew what you meant, but I wanted to clarify.
Percent clip this year or more, 12% clip. That's pretty good. I mean, that's a big number. If that's gas, sales.
If we get it to do that every year, we'll be all right.
Yeah, I wouldn't count on it.
No, I wouldn't count on it either, but if we could do it every year.
Interesting note. I'm curious, do you know off the top of your head, it's expected to be 35 next year, 31, and do you remember what it was the year before? 28?
Year before, the previous.
The first year? Was it a full year?
I have it all down. I have it in a
I'm
schedule.
just wondering if we're at a point where if it was a
Start to.
start year, I'm for some reason, I want to say 27, 28, then 31, now 34.
If we can take that and
First year.
put our,
I think it was 18 the first year.
Our first funding was 18.6
We had a
million.
$3 million gap.
Yeah, it wasn't a full year.
It started like in March.
That's right, so it wasn't your full year. That's
we can track our budget versus what that is and
100%.
kind of
That's exactly
see exactly how that's
exactly right.
through.
What's your zero fare, the expense of zero fare is what,
Yeah.
6.8 million?
Is that after you take out collection
Yeah, the
costs,
expense.
the expense side of it?
Estimated revenue was 8 million. So taking
Really?
out
Okay.
1.2.
It's 1.2
So
to
the 8
make it.
million came from where?
Fare box, the fare box.
People putting the money in the fare boxes or using the
Okay,
passes.
so now we get, since we haven't been doing the fare box.
Or grants.
8 million less, but we save 1.2,
2
so
expenses are collected.
6.8 million less in the budget than there would be if we had a full fare coming in.
So I'm saying, so 6.8 is the cost.
Yeah.
So getting the 6.8 now from where is what I'm saying. All grants.
25 was grants.
It was
25
grants.
was grants, but we have other sources.
Well, we do have our revenues based on our ridership, and our ridership is probably significantly higher than it's higher. I don't know how to quantify it, but it's higher than it would be if it was full fare because less people would be able to ride the bus. So
So is that a slide on here somewhere?
I doubt it. I don't know how you quantify
Yeah,
that.
revenue slide,
It's-
yeah.
That's a revenue
Good
slide.
question.
Yeah, so to your point is that with
Some
of it.
My point is, we're gonna lose the VCU money, grant money. That went towards zero fare.
We applied for another grant, congestion mitigation air quality, and it has to work its way through TAC and TPO. But it seems like it's promising. That one's 2 million. So
How long is that for?
we can reapply every year.
But it's annual.
But it's annual, yes. We're hoping that it will be sustainable. And then working with City of Richmond, they are looking at giving $1 million towards the zero fare. So that's 3 million right there of the
So was the city
6.8.
giving anything before? So this is their first time giving $1 million. Huh.
It's a return to that conversation though, because if I remember correctly, there was a hold for the million that, remember we.
The city at one time said that they would cover the difference, but we didn't actually need to do that because we had enough to cover it, so they never did. have-
Conversation that Lincoln had at this
Right,
time.
Lincoln said he would cover the million if he needed to, but
We all agreed.
we agreed it wasn't necessary, so we didn't ask them to put the money.
We still had reduced routes at that time, so there was a significant surplus related to their routes.
Also, a little bit of a timing difference on the second bullet point, the DRPT operating contribution of 23 million. That's 30% of our fiscal 24. So our fiscal 25 budget was 90 million. So 30% of 90 million is 27 million, which that will be 27's basis for calculating. So the two things with the increased ridership, the ridership number took us up to the ceiling of the 30%, where we weren't at before, because this
But we can't
DRPT
go
operating
above
contribution number
30.
is Dorona. Remember, we're in the meeting with Dorona, this was 11 million, then it was 17 million, now it's, it's moving its way up. So
That's
that's
the
based on ridership as well as expenses.
It's 30%. We earn that level of 30% and that's the number.
But we can't go any higher, that's the problem. So, zero fares, it gets harder to make the numbers work on zero fare just because you can't get any more than that on the other side for your ridership.
Who do you get that money from, the ridership money? If you have X amount of dollars, you get what?
The state,
State,
the
yeah.
state, it comes from the
Department of
state.
Rail.
Mhm, yes.
And I mean, and they could change the formula too. It's up to them. They review it. I don't know how often. Every few
Like
years.
3 years, so it'll come from Tuesday. Right now, it's already pointed out, it's not favorable, it's on ridership. It always has to be ridership, or this might be. Agency size, such.
Yeah, so they can change it.
I know I'm 30 minutes late, so I don't know what I missed before I got here.
You just missed the January
January,
financial.
Oh, okay.
You're good on everything.
Yeah, I'm worried about zero fare, so, but I'm gonna be quiet, because it might be something in here you share. Yeah, I am worried about it.
We're okay for the next fiscal year. It's down the road that we got.
The good thing that we're talking about is the VDOT forecast. If gasoline and diesel prices come down, people might be incented to drive more miles. Burden excise tax would be more of a receipt. So hopefully as gasoline and fuel costs come down, if they come down, it will prompt more usage of it, which will help the VDOT receipts. Next slide here. This is, the CPIU adjustment. So February's CPIU was released yesterday. So you can, it's
2.8?
282. So,
All right.
we had baked in from the last discussion 3%. So all this previous slide here, based on the 3% function, it's about an increase in the base operating contribution rates about 417,000 amongst the three.
That's changing it to 2.8 or what month don't you use February?
We use February, yeah.
So now you can change the 3 to a 2.8. It's going the wrong way for you.
Told everybody to
So
three.
we hopefully our budgeted 3. That's what we're leaving it at.
They're begging for 3. That's what I just heard.
So you can see here, in here, this is the calculation of 3% for each of the jurisdictions. I mean, the difference of 18 basis points is de minimis.
Is it minimal? That's
De
good.
minimis, yeah.
I mean,
So
It's something you just
for
throw.
Chesterfield, it's minimal. I don't know.
It's just something you throw away.
de minimis ones.
0.18% on your number is different than Ellen's number. Is that a word? I'll have to Google that. Is that a word? Is it minimus? I can't spell it.
Accounting term.
I can't spell it.
We use that in the their provided automobiles.
But you can send that to the jurisdictions now that CPI's out, right? They know it's 282 now. So when we go into budget next week, it's 282. Is that right? Or is the
Well,
ask?
they're asking for 3.
The ask is still 3.
We go ahead and go back in November 3.
What did they say?
Okay.
They said that's it.
Did Richmond say?
Can we do more?
How'd you know?
I knew that was going to be your answer.
I think they said they wanted to give us 7.5.
Yeah, I knew that was going to be your answer. I got a feeling that's not actually accurate information, though.
It's one that's hard to read up there and on the paper.
So I'm sorry, this one's a little hard to read. We're gonna-
Good golly, I don't think he wants you to read that.
I was thinking the same.
That is de minimis writing.
There was some request to, basically, we put it in this form. We're gonna, obviously, we're working this right up to about 10 minutes before this meeting. And we're going to,
Resend it to us in a digital form that we can actually blow up and read.
well, yeah, at the board meeting, we'll circulate something possibly. I'll hand it out. So what I'll do is, we wanted to show in here what this is just to show the magnitude of the grant, funded federal and state projects that we have that are in here. So when you look at, come on. Yeah,
That's the next page.
I know, sorry. I hit the wrong button.
Just go to the up arrow.
Still might jump because you're zoomed in. So use the spreadsheet version.
It's the same on the printout.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, that's what minimus.
This is all, this is the revenue summary, right?
Yes.
Don't even try.
Doesn't matter.
What is the revenue summary? 112 million? And that includes 7.1 of CBT. Plus more. No, it includes more because of capital.
7.1 per quarter.
7.1 per quarter.
So total of
plus-
24.
28.6 million.
Plus whatever you pull out of capital. I had to get my glasses to see that.
I don't have mine, they're in my office.
You said there's capital needs above and beyond the 7.1, right?
Right.
This is the email.
Say 1.2.
1.2 for capital and 250 set aside for a match with the
So
city
it's
of
100,
Richmond
there's
for,
112.161 of
study
it.
downtown.
There's $23.2 million worth of studies. So the base operations are 88.9 million in revenue. So I can slide this up and down.
And the year before, it was 73?
73.
17 for studies, 90 overall. That's the current year we're in.
Yes.
So
30.
Percentage wise.
But remember, 13 million of that is studies, so it's one-time money.
Oh, that's good. It's not operational.
No.
I guess the easy question.
They have grants.
Trying to separate that
Can
out.
be easy too, but those are studies that we need to do.
Yeah, they're the north-south engineering.
That's
Well,
cool.
they're also,
The reason it's a dumb question, but it's a simple question is like when if it needs to be done, then we're gonna do it. But if it's something that is like
We wouldn't do it.
an implementation that we're not gonna make, well, then let's hold off on that, bank the money and do the study at another time.
well, you can't necessarily because it's paid for by a grant.
It has to be used.
Yeah, you can't get the money unless you use the grant for the study.
So the state grants are for 1 year and then, or
Yeah, so you gotta use-
years, we define it when you put the application.
Where we have to be more careful, to Dan's point, is where you have a grant that has a matching fund you don't want to use the matching dollars to the grant if we're not going to implement it. But if it's a grant that pays for the study completely,
It makes sense. That's a good answer.
makes sense to do
It's
that.
grant money has to get used, grant money has to get used.
And the way to look at
One
it,
time, so it's not recurrence.
right, so the 13 million, if we weren't to do any studies next year, would not be in the operating budget. So it's a way to look at it. So it's like $100 million budget versus.
Being able to do it now and
Yeah.
operating next year.
The takeaway that you can see here and, kind of, I don't know, it's up here, you got this.
Well, that's a lot better because that's like a 10% increase, not a 30 or 25%
So
increase.
there's the 28, that's quarterly, that's annual.
That's annual.
Broken down in a quarter.
To answer Dan's, you see over here, here's what the 25s was.
Yep,
There was this part for a grant funded match for
Yep.
CBTA. You can see this is the TISDAC, the DRPT Virginia money.
yep.
And you see the contributions coming in from the counties and the city. You see this or it's part of it, the zero fare match, the GRTC reserve and VCU, there's 100,000 and there's still about $1.1 million left of to be determined to balance the budget. So otherwise, without that in there, we're out of balance by 1.1 million. But at this point, we're putting that in there.
We were
can either
5 million out last time.
Right, last time.
Now we're 1.1 million out. We're getting closer.
Those jurisdictional ones, the Richmond, Henrico, Chesterfield, that's where the 3% comes in.
3%, right. And then there's some,
I told you.
also inclusive of, the zero fare for Richmond's $1 million contribution, as well as some project grant matches that they put on the table as well.
What is TRIP zero fare grant match GRTC reserve? Is that what you were just talking about?
Yeah, that was, so there was a TRIP grant in 25, 24, and 23, so it ran its course. So it required various matching. So what ended up happening was in the 1 year, Richmond had said that $1.5 million of the match was within their own operating contribution. So theoretically, it was our reserve. And then as we noted in the 25 budget, we had booked $1,040,000 from coming out of the GRTC reserve, which we haven't had to touch.
Got it.
So we have a fund balance surplus about 4.6 right now.
Awesome. And then if I missed it, I'm sorry. FTA Flex went up $10 million. What is that?
That's your 5307. You can flex 10% for cost of contracting for paratransit, which would be $1.5 million. And then the balance of this is for your preventative maintenance. So this is funding your
The grant?
salaries. It's the federal FTA 5307 formula grant fund. So you can
Money coming from the federal, the state to you. That's nice. $10 million more?
We didn't need
We didn't
to use
use it
it, so
all.
we
So
kept
this
it for
is-
capital
You
projects.
can use capital or you can flex its operations. So this year we're
Flexing the tops.
We're flexing the tops.
Yeah.
Put it away for capital.
That's right. Yeah.
That makes sense. That's helpful in the budget this year.
It does help, yeah.
Gaps that you needed to close.
Yeah, that does help. Well, like I said, we went from 5 million last time to 1.1 million this time we'll probably be balanced the next time we talk about it.
It is balanced, but I guess the.
Well, it's not balanced when you have a gap.
We still have.
I'm just telling you, it's not balanced when there's
Gap, I didn't get
the
that.
1.1.
No, I mean, but we have the surplus to be able to, because we didn't even use this.
I can bring
Okay.
forward 2025s.
I'm just saying that.
Not to, but we can't.
Obviously, we left it this way at this point because we don't know the exact grant awards that are coming in April. So when we go through the next version of this, we'll be all better known variables and we'll put it to rest.
We are 1,100,000 of reserves in to be even right now. So to not have to dip in our reserves, we're 1.1 million away from being balanced.
Did I miss that number somewhere?
It's in it says GRTC reserve, zero trip fare.
Oh, that's it right there.
GRTC reserve, the reserve is what we're pulling out,
0.04 last year.
You said you didn't use it yet, though.
but we didn't use it, right?
Oh, 52-ish million, if I remember that number right?
So also in there, we've increased the advertising revenue to
I still rather not have.
Your interest on your 52
Have
million.
to.
About that, probably.
Yeah.
I still not.
Probably 475 basis points, so 5% of it, so 10, 5.2, 2.5 million, 2.5 million.
Yeah, you're using reserve money that is less than the interest you're gaining on the reserve.
Right. Yep.
That's good math.
Yeah.
I'm good with that math.
Well, I'm okay with the using
Provided interest rates-
I'm okay with using interest dollars. But
Yeah. And as you saw from the and obviously now we're making it up on volume as the cash flow is growing,
Yeah.
both in operations. and-
100%. Yeah, I mean, the bigger that gets, the more that's gonna, but you on overall, you gained about 2.5 million in interest last year. And you pulled $1 million out of your reserve, which is the stuff that's gaining interest. You're not even pulling out the interest amount.
it's the principal,
Not the actual
basically.
reserve.
It's not really principal, but same difference.
It's your carryover, yeah.
I don't mind budgeting
Retirement, you know.
the interest income, but I don't want to touch the
Actual reserve.
actual reserve itself.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't have a problem budgeting the interest though.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Rename it.
Yeah.
So this is a kind of condensed version. So this is, there'll be
That'll get
another
you
sheet
where
we'll
you
put
need
in the
to,
next
probably.
version. It shows all the different projects that sum up to like the operating expense reimbursement, VDOT, state. So the VDOT, that's our line extensions, the 19-7A and Route 1 extensions that, Route 1 is 80% state funded. The 19 and the 7A, 7B is 100% funded by the state. And then we have the whole host of projects, the North-South BRT, the Western, and, the Western Park and Ride one. Those are all federal and state funded.
The trip zero fare grant and the VCU was about the 5.7. That's the number that we had in last time that we felt was weird, right? Now it's gone.
Yeah,
That's gone.
as you can see, the line is.
It was advertising dollars that we didn't have advertising limits.
It's your 10 million that's right there that you decide to transfer the flex to fixed it. And then some. Yeah, right.
Last year, there was the 4.56 million was a zero fare grant. We've already expended all of that
Gone.
and we received all that money in from the state already through.
So that 5.7 came out of your revenue.
So everything
Now
they
it-
go and get now in advertising dollars
Is that
will
what the 800?
will aid all this.
That's the advertising,
Is that what
yeah.
the 800 grand is?
That's the goal, if not more.
Are you doing that in-house?
Yes, yes, we have a person in our marketing department that's working on that.
The goal is more, but we'll start
Right.
there.
Well, we talked about wrapping buses. Are we still talking about wrapping?
Wow.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right.
we're getting business.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good.
A good quarter for that.
What do you get for that? I'm just trying to do the math. How many buses do we need to wrap? Like, what's a wrap bus cost somebody? No idea. I'm just trying to do the math. If it's like 80 grand for the year, I need 10 of those. Like, I'm just trying to, in my mind, I'm trying to figure out.
Should that one company wanted to do it?
Was it 300,000?
How many buses did they want?
It was like 30. wasn't it
30 buses? That was like close to, I think it was close to $1 million. It was a lot.
But they reduced it. this
Yeah,
year.
they came down here and ended up doing $200,000 worth versus.
For like 20 buses.
Oh, well, if there was $1 million for 30, then 200,000 should have been about 6 buses.
Don't quote me on the numbers. Like, we're at like 300 for this quarter, but it's been picking up. Like we've got companies
saying.
we like.
Oh, I
we
think,
have-
I agree. Well, a couple things. One, the more, because you did 300,000 this quarter, when people see wrapped buses, companies.
that was-
A company like mine would see that and be like, oh, hey, I'm hiring. I might do that. That'd be a great place for a company like me. It's a recruiting heaven, in my opinion, because I want employees on that
Yeah.
line.
Right.
Number one. Number two, the more buses that are out there wrapped, it's advertising for yourself.
And you can pick the route you want to wrap, right?
The
No,
buses get rotated throughout the whole network. because-
that's the only thing. Well,
Three, I believe.
Could.
It's still regional.
Unless you do the pulse.
Yeah.
yeah, but if there was a particular business that was on a particular route, I guess they're still going to get employees coming and making changes, so.
It still would.
Legislatively, you got some help too, because you mentioned Coors Light a minute ago. You couldn't have done that if you.
That helped.
You can't do alcohol, you can't do whiskey, you can't do tobacco. And I think you got some approval to do gambling now.
All of those, yeah, were approved.
Yeah, so, you can do
That-
gaming.
Camera?
FanDuel, BetMGM, like,
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's March Madness time, Ellen, aren't you? No?
But I mean, that number,
It opened up windows.
it does.
and that number is passive, so
And
now
look,
that we have it, we can go back.
they pretty much brought the balanced budget in without having to put their gambling into,
Funny.
That's how we're gonna balance it. Go play the
we're gonna take $100,000 out of the interest.
Oh.
that on March Madness, and if it pays off, it'll be big.
At 605 into
Yeah,
into a 1.2, that's a big deal.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
I really do hope no one's watching it.
There's 5 people watching.
Jeffrey said it was 5. He heard
There's 5 watching, so we really are joking.
Good on this page.
Might be employees.
What
Okay.
happens if you,
I apologize for the eye chart, but we were working up to the,
that's near the bottom, right? Petersburg is near the bottom.
Oh,
I think it's, yeah, it's right at the bottom now. That's it right there.
and on the other slides here is the expense sides, and you can kind of see, you break out, between the base, you can see the expenses that are in the grant funded column. Those are supported by those grants. Obviously, like in the bottom by category, wages and benefits, that's where we filed a GRPT grant for the public safety officers and the transit ambassadors. So that's why that's wages generated. Services, the 11.187 million, that's basically the consultancies to do the North-South BRT. And what's the other piece?
The last 3 years, that at least I've been sitting here, we've come out of a year with surplus to budget, right? So it's safe to assume that we use, this is the same thing Jack Barry did a few years ago, Ellen, if you remember. Remember he was having a bad year coming off COVID and had those delays, and he said, I'd like to put 2 million of our reserve in our budget. And we were like, I don't know if I love that, but he ran a 2 million, took 2 million out of reserve and put it in his operating. And he came back at the end of the year with a $2.8 million surplus and put it right back. So historically, you're taking 1.2 million out of reserve and you're using it for operating. If you end the year with a $1.2 million surplus, it goes back. Same exact thing we did at RT after COVID, because the lag on the occupancy taxes.
I personally would prefer not to put the original
I agree.
money, but I don't mind budgeting the interest that we expect to come in so that we stay at least even at worst. I don't have.
The reason I don't mind is because last year we did 1.04. This year is 1.2 something. And every year I've been sitting here, there's been a surplus. Whether it's vacancy savings or.
Well, that's probably where it's going to come from if there's a savings, although we got to be careful that we don't override it with the overtime. Make sure that.
Right.
What are we with the reserve right now?
What's that?
With the reserves.
52-ish million, is that correct?
That's just
That's
CVTA.
CVTA.
That's not the, that's, what's the other
The
one?
GRTC reserve.
We have to, it's 5.7 and then you got the other Davis Avenue, so the two of them combined. But we have, it's in fund balance, we want to bring the 24 surplus over into. After we should we do that?
What is it about at now?
It's
5.7.
5.7 and then.
Wonders, once you bring it out, it could get close to 10. So there's your answer. I didn't know that, Ellen. It's a good question. So like 10 in the GRTC reserve, about 52 in the CVTA reserve.
So is it six? So CVTA and.
Well, CVTA reserve in that 52 is basically our 26 funding
Right, that's true.
is in there, so it's.
Correct.
Plus 28.
Yeah, but it's going to fill every.
The interest is gaining on the what's in there.
So we have a separate CVTA reserve because of the whole one previous year. Why is the CVTA reserve separate from the operating?
It's because it's that the CVTA, the 52 million is governed by the Regional Public Transportation Plan. So we can only get authorization to spend that once that is outlined in that. So those collections sit there in a separate dedicated fund waiting for the authorization to be spent from the Regional Public.
A little more restriction on it, but your surplus, your reserve, the GRTC has built up over time. You have incredible flexibility, if not all flexibility.
So from the regional, from who?
It's the Regional Public Transportation Plan that it comes through the board when we bring it in April or May.
No, it's coming this month.
It comes this month to March, and then it goes to CVTA's Finance Committee, and then the CVTA's Big Board for adoption. So basically, that lays out all the expenditure programs for GRTC from July 1st to 25 through June 30th to 26. And as well, it also has the future spending too.
So you develop a plan, we say okay, and then it goes to CBTA.
And then they have to say,
Yes,
okay.
and they have to-
Yeah.
yes.
Similar to the localities with their plans.
And then that's why we have the quarterly reporting of what our receipts are versus our expenditures that we submit to CBTA Finance Committee on a quarterly basis. Then we have the annual certification that goes in on December 1.
Is there a formula, anything that they use to determine what theirs is going to be on a quarterly basis? The reason why is,
But the report,
What actually is collected from the tax.
VDOT sends, we get a report from Chesterfield Treasury on a monthly basis that shows all the collections and then how it's broken out amongst the
based on,
9 different municipalities, and then the buckets between the shared 35%, the GRTC bucket, and then what returns to municipalities on a monthly basis.
VITA does a projection in December each year,
December.
but as far as what's
Yeah.
realized,
They do about, I think it's about
Comes
5
from-
years, I think they have.
5 years at a time, yeah. Yep.
So one more month of this review before it goes to the board?
Yep.
April, and then it goes to the board in May.
So,
Well, it'll come to us twice before then and then to the board in May.
yeah, so we'll have an April update here with this board, and then we'll formalize all these slides and the budget book for dissemination at the April district board meeting, and then we'll have the finance committee meeting.
Which all members are invited to.
So we'll have it.
Really?
All board members are invited to.
We'll go through the
Okay.
budget book and field any questions from anybody. We'll go page by page, so it'll be longer, and you'll see the narratives as to why this went up and down. So it'll be.
I remember that. It's like,
I don't remember doing that last year, but I thought that was a good idea. That way, if anybody has any real questions, we can keep the board meeting time period like we have been. And I'd rather work it out in committee than
Todd was the only one who came.
Yeah, because we invited him.
he's shocked.
Like, how
That's
much-
why the goal is to get the book out at the April meeting. So people like to read on their own. Some people might want to come to the May meeting, so we're trying to do it both ways.
You were the.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
All right. Any other business? All right, we're adjourned.
Can I ask a question that's not, it's not off the agenda? Well, first of all, thank you. I'll sleep better tonight with that than I did last time. I did not feel comfortable whatsoever with the 5.8 million, and I didn't make any sense. The whole thing, this one makes really perfect sense to me. So however you explained it different, or whatever adjustments you made,
Flex helped.
the way you demonstrated it, it
We pulled
We
expenses
did, we made
down.
some adjustments.
remarkably helpful for piece, at least for me. I am a numbers guy. I don't know. That makes more sense to me. So thank you. Shelters? Are we almost close to giving some really good news to folks, particularly in Henrico? I'm sorry. But are we building shelters? Do we have a plan?
not before Richmond though.
Well, actually, the first Henrico shelter, first shelter of
Kind of
our,
like my leader.
I think we actually funded some. I don't remember, but I think we actually provided our own funding for it to fuel it, right?
yeah, you guys got a congressional earmark.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So are we?
So the first one, it's going to all of
I
it.
can almost touch you
The
on.
reason I'm asking is I need like picture, I need to be at one because
Okay.
I've been promising these things in community meetings and HOAs for a year and a half now. And I got called out 2 weeks ago in an HOA meeting that I stood at exactly a year ago and they said, ain't seen one, bro.
Is Chamberlain and Wilmer your